Hello everyone, thanks for coming along to DC Storm's presentation on You Can't Manage What You Can't Measure. As you can probably tell, I'm not Lenssen. He had to duck out, so I'm standing in for him pretty last minute. He's given me the really interesting topic of measurement to talk to you guys about. And I know it gets some of the eyes rolling. It's not necessarily the most interesting thing that you think you could be talking about, but I'm hoping that I can make it quite interesting to you. And I'm confident that it can be a really valuable thing and make a really big difference to the success of your business. And actually, luckily for you guys, you only have to listen to this for half an hour. This is what I do every single day. So to give you some background, why is it that I'm talking to you? Well, I work for DC Storm, and they are market leaders in measurement, performance and reporting. I've got experience working with a number of big name clients, bags of experience actually, so helping implement measurement and success across them, and I'll talk to you a little about what that means. So DC Storm itself, we do a number of things, but what we've always had at the core is this idea of really truly valuing your marketing and how it is that you can go about doing that. So just to skim past this slide pretty quickly, the agenda. I'm going to give you an introduction, so explain to you what I mean by measurement. And then we'll talk about some different types of measurement and how they can be valuable for your businesses and what it is I think is missed in a lot of cases there. Then we'll talk about why it is that measurement is overlooked, as I just said. Talk about some common practice examples of bad measurement, so what it is that, in my opinion, a huge majority of companies are still doing that mean that they're really missing out in this way. Then we'll talk about some of the challenges that there can be in implementing a success. Talk about why it's worth bothering when it's quite a difficult thing to put in place. And then finally we'll tackle what the solution is. So like any great presentation, I've started with a quote here, probably one that you're all quite familiar with. Half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I just don't know which half. So I think when digital marketing came about, everyone thought, oh, well, here we go. The promise was that this would solve all of your problems. You know, you can finally actually measure the performance of your marketing. It used to be, put a billboard up and no one would know what was happening. But nowadays, people gave you this dream and they said, well, actually, you can track all of your online marketing, so this will no longer be a problem. And what I would say is that it still is very much a problem. People are still not measuring the performance of their campaigns, of their channels properly. And the point really is that if you're not measuring something, then how is it that you're supposed to, optimize these channels? If you don't know if you're going to implement a new campaign, if you're not measuring it properly, how can you really tell if that campaign's gone well or if that campaign's gone badly? So micro and macro measurement. What I mean here is, and it's something that I think a lot of companies have been focused on, the kind of way that people have been optimising their digital marketing so far, is to look at maximising the profit of those individual channels. So essentially what I mean here is micro measurement. So up until now, people have been working on a PPC, if you work on PPC or you work on SEO, and the idea is that you're trying to maximise the return, the ROI on each of those channels in isolation. And that's valuable and that's all well and good. But another side of it, which can be as equally valuable and if not more, is the idea of maximising your revenue across all of these channels. So if one of them is worth more investment than another, how do you know that and how do you measure that? And I think it's something that a lot of companies aren't doing at the moment. So let me give you an example. Here we've got 3 marketing channels, and in this situation we have split our spend equally across each of those channels. So this is obviously a simplistic example, but I'm hoping it demonstrates what I mean by these 2 different approaches. So we're spending an equal amount on each because at the moment we don't know which is performing better. We know the ROI on channel 1 is 250%, so for every £1 that I'm spending, I'm getting £2.50 back from that channel. Channel 2 has got an ROI of 300%, so I'm getting £3 back from my marketing there. and channel 3 has got an ROI of 400%. So that means that I know that my sales from each of those channels, from putting that spend into them, is 25,000, 30,000, 40,000 respectively. Now, if I know that my margin on these products is a static margin there of 40%, obviously that's much more complex in the real world, but things that can be taken into account. So in this example, we know that our margin is 40%. So that means on those sales, we're returning a margin of £10,000 from channel 1, £12,000 from channel 2, and £16,000 from channel 3. My profit, my final figure from each of those channels, is just deducting that initial spend that I'm putting into each of those channels to work out what my real net profit value is there. So what you can see here is that channel 1 is actually delivering me break even, no value at all. Channel 2 is returning me £2,000 and channel 3 is returning me £6,000. So what most companies do, and there's nothing wrong with it and it's very, very valuable, is they try and maximise that ROI within each of those channels. So, for example, in this next line here, we've got that we've increased the ROI of channel 1 to 275%. That now means that that's a profitable channel to us, and that has in turn increased our net profits to £9,000. Well, that's fantastic, but if we have all of this visibility and we know that these are true performance measures, then why wouldn't we move some of that value that we're driving into that less successful channel and push it into that channel 3, which is driving us more value? Now, obviously, there might be problems with saturation in the market, and there are other factors that there need to be taken into account of. But there's definitely, and what we've found is there's so many companies that have got room for growth in certain directions, and at the moment they're just not optimising it because they can't see where to take that cost from. So in this example here, we've moved all of that value from that spend from channel 1 and channeled it into channel 3. Too many times I'm saying channel. And we can now see that increase in profit is not only increasing that profit there, but it means you're not spending any more, you're just simply taking it away from that one that's not making you any money. So obviously very simplified view, but that's kind of the idea of being able to move your money around, budgeting across all of your different channels as opposed to just looking at them in isolation or in silos. So if we know that this is the case, then why is it that so many companies overlook this and don't put this in place? Well, one reason, which I'm not sure what the awareness is within the company, but what we find is that quite often there's a little bit of hesitation from different members of the team. So for every channel that is being undervalued and that could do with more budget, there's going to be channels that are actually being overvalued, right? So there's there's quite often people from teams that are pushing for this kind of a solution, but then there's other hesitation from across the business. And at the same time, it's not something that anyone's going to be able to implement. So, I don't know, Bob, who's working on his social media, he's not going to be saying, guys, right, I think what we need to do is we need to start looking at the performance of all our channels. It kind of takes some kind of higher level and seniority to be able to put that in place. And that can be one of the major barriers that we see. Another reason is that it's obviously very difficult to do this. You know, how can we really get this full picture? It takes time, it takes money quite often, it's quite a lot of resource, and as I say, it takes someone to step up and to take this role that needs to push this through. And at the end of the day, who is the office hero? So it's quite often that, I don't know, let's say that you run this project and you see that 30% of your budget could be moved into different places. And what that does is it means that your net profits are being increased by 50%. The person that comes across as the hero is always going to be the person who's running that channel that then brings in those profits, not the person who said, oh, I think we should move our budgeting around. So some examples of bad measurement. And I think a lot of companies do settle with bad measurement, and I think they know that they're not measuring things correctly. It's almost accepted. But what they do is they kind of, you know, they sit down and they say, well, we know this isn't perfect, but let's account for this or let's account for that. And that can kind of, you know, cause those big office conversations when someone's saying, oh, why are we spending so much money on our display advertising? Well, we can't really see any value in this. And someone else is saying, well, it's because you can't see that, but what it's actually doing is this, this, and this. And these arguments, we hear them across, you know, everyone that we speak to. And people accept that, oh, we're never going to know. But I mean, the reality is that you definitely can. My next point here is no measurement versus bad measurement. And what I mean by this is, I guess it's not going to be as invaluable. Any measurement is better than nothing, I suppose, really. But my point is that if you're measuring in an inaccurate way, then you're going to be optimising your channels based on these numbers that actually, who's to say that there's not something that you're not accounting for that's completely moving that in a different direction. So some examples, again, of some bad measurement. So traditionally, a lot of marketing companies have used last click. So these numbers, again, are a very simplistic view. But on last click, we can see here that channel 1 is delivering us by far the most value. Companies, this actually, as I go through these, they actually, I guess I'm overlaying things I think that you can do that drive much clearer and much better measurement across them all. But I'll talk to you about each of the things that, to give you an example of what people just don't do. So brand visits. So are you treating your brand visits differently to that? What I mean by brand are navigational visits. So if somebody comes directly to your website, for example, do we want to be discounting that, saying, well, actually, let's just look at the true marketing channels that have been in that journey? Again, maybe with PPC, if someone's come search for your brand term, then maybe that's a much less valuable visit than that initial generic term that drove it in the first place. So are you accounting for brand visits? So you can see here that that's completely dropped the value that Channel 1's brought us. Call centre sales. So this is all about saying, well, we might be able to say that these channels are bringing us this value online, but who's to say that they're not driving the calls to the call centre and people are converting in that way? So if we can bring in those numbers as well, then we've got a much higher level of visibility. Returns and exchanges. So this is similar to promotional codes as well. You'll often find, and we do with many of our clients that we track, that there are certain channels that tend to drive, I guess, less valuable sales. And if you can't see that, and you're just looking at those kind of top level figures, and you're not accounting for the fact that, or maybe people coming through this channel, but actually they're then returning all of these products, then you can't optimise it again there. So I guess my end point here is that if we look at then the true value, which is probably would have accounted for a number of these things, but then another of additional factors on top of this, then the figures are completely different. You know, we see that Channel 3 now is by far the most powerful channel. And that's everything I just said. I'm writing for you. But it's even more complicated than that. So nowadays, people don't just want to understand their online channels. They want to understand it across devices. So I'm pretty sure that most people here use more than one computer, one laptop, a tablet, an iPhone. So if you're doing a browsing behaviour at your office computer, you get on your train home, and that's when you then decide to purchase something. It's not going to be clear in our reporting if we're not able to link up those journeys and see that in one neat view. So that's another challenge. Multiple sale channels. So I touched on this on the other slide. Call centre sales was the example I used. But people have store sales. Not just even sales, people have other things that they value as much as conversion. And it's important that these channels are linked together where possible, obviously. But that all of this information is there and available for us to be reporting on. And the final thing as well is multiple marketing channels. So although this is great and we are talking specifically here about digital marketing, you'll also find that you can, again, maximise profits even further if you can spread that across your offline marketing as well. So if you're sending out direct mail campaigns, and that's actually driving a lot of your online visits, which are resulting, being rewarded for those sales, then actually there's maybe more value in moving some of that budget over to your direct mail marketing than there will be in trying to optimise in that bubble again on your online campaigns. So it's about having that complete view. So it's so complicated, why bother? I think the answer is pretty obvious. I'm not going to dwell on the slide. It's basically a I mean, we can say that it's very provenly successful. Many of our clients do it. It certainly takes time and input, and it's an investment. It does certainly take that, but once it's there, it's a structure that allows you to use it from then on. So if you're introducing a new channel and you want to know its performance instantly, then you can see that from day one of setting that in there, as long as you can plug that in and capture all of that information from day one. So measured success is a concept, I guess it's a framework that we've developed at Storm, which we think summarises kind of 6 key points or key areas that allow you to achieve this measured success and allow you to look at this complete picture. So I'm going to just skim through them on this slide. Okay, so it's not that all of these points will be applicable to every company. All companies have got different objectives. They want to be tracking different things, so it won't all apply to everyone. It's also not an out of the box thing. You can't just say, well, let's put this tracking on our site and then suddenly we're going to have this visibility. You know, by putting Google Analytics tracking on your site, it doesn't mean that you've got a complete picture joined up there. It doesn't mean that you know how your offline sales are being brought into that, or what these other touch points are being involved in that journey. So it's a number of steps to take you to that place. So the first one, marketing and sales channel tracking. So the most important point here is to identify and to work out what the key performance or key points and the key pieces of information that you want to pull in to your measured success hub are. So whether this be sales, inquiries offline, anything that's going to be valuable to understand, then that needs to be identified and that needs to be tracked. You may already be capturing some of this, so quite often we'll find that a lot of this information is actually already there and available. So for example, your call centre has probably got a whole load of call centre stats, and they're probably utilising them within that bubble, but they can share those very easily to everyone else. So a unified data view is where you need to put all of this information. So I guess essentially this is like having a data hub, a data resource that stores it all in one place, but it also makes it easy for you to upload information, but also download information as easily too. So as I said before, if you're going to implement a new channel, you need to be able to plug that in to that box. There's different data types. So the solution that you find needs to be flexible. It needs to allow for information that you can tie into a user journey at a user granular level to be plugged in at that level. But it also needs to allow for information. So I don't know, you're doing TV advertising. We can't hook that into a user level, but it needs to be able to be overlaid. It needs to still be in that single place for you to be able to report on. The data needs to be secure. Obviously there's going to be a lot of information here, so there needs to be flexibility, I guess, is the important thing there. It needs to be different levels of access to different people that will be using this information. And it needs to be accessible, so you need to be able to go in and pull and run these things whenever necessary. Attribution is the next thing that's very important to be able to do properly off the back of this. So I think attribution is one of those buzzword things that everyone kind of talked about last year, and it was like, oh, are you doing attribution? Yeah, we're doing attribution. Maybe that was just in my world. But I actually think that a lot of companies miss the point. So they would, I don't know, they put their tracking on and they said, oh, we've now got an attribution model. Well, did you have an attribution model? The point really is to understand the value truly. So unless you've got that full picture there, unless you've got that measurement in an accurate way, then how can you really say that you're truly implementing an attribution model? It's not just about splitting it across everything that's been involved that you can see. It's about working out what's valuable, which of these visits was more valuable and why was that, and how can we see that in the bigger picture. Otherwise, yeah, as I say, I think people just miss the point. That was my point there. And the last point here is that it's not a one-off. So an attribution model isn't something that you put in place and then you leave. It's actually something that you need to refresh, you need to review, and the market will change, your business proposition will change. So you need to be aware of that and re-evaluating it on a regular basis. Trading analytics. So this fourth point is the idea that you need these reports and this data to be available. But actually, the data that you're going to be looking at isn't just website analytics, and it isn't just your marketing trends. It's much broader than that. So once you have this place, you can start to make buying decisions. So you can start to say, well, you know, what's becoming a hot product, or delivery decisions. You can also run different pieces of regional insights. If you've got any suspicions, you might be able to clear those up by running campaigns in different areas. Those kind of things that divert away from just looking at your budgeting in itself. So actionable insight. This is really the way that we think it's important to address the questions that you have, or in order to use the information in a valuable way. You can't just delve into it and say, oh, well, let's try and look for something interesting. That, even if you do find something interesting, it's not particularly useful. So the approach is to say you need to define and ask the question that you have before making this next step and starting to look at the data. You need to decide on what your actions would be in advance. So if I want to test to see, I think this is working, but I'm not really sure. I think my display is contributing here. If it is, then I will do this. If it isn't, then I will do this. So it's the kind of, if you don't do that, then you're just never going to get anywhere with so much data around you. And what's next? So this is the big, I think, probably big question that we've been asking, and where we've been trying to go. And the answer, as it's got here, is budget planning. So the idea that you can have a tool that you're plugging all of this information into, but then you're actually able to process and get some automated responses there. But as I say, this isn't even going to be possible until that data is there. This is something that we're doing at the moment in conjunction with Play.com. So they're very keen to be able to look at cross-channel, online, offline, and be able to work out how they should be splitting their budget in the same way that people are doing within those channel hubs.